The floor is yours, Dr. Fylypovych, please.
Thank you very much. I try to keep the time of my paper. And then first, I would like to congratulate to all Turkish colleagues. It's a great pleasure for me to join the scientific conference initiated by you, dear friends, on the topic of orthodoxy in Eastern Europe. It's always nice to be the object for research as now. Therefore, I would like to thank the Turkish side for organizing such conferences, and especially for Professor Yücel Öztürk and Sema Aktaş and Professor Ferhat Turanli. I plan to analyze the historical and a little bit contemporary status of Ukrainian churches of the Eastern Christian tradition, but not sure that it's enough time for deeply analyzing. So my main idea is, at the beginning of the 21st century, Ukraine found themselves at the epicenter of the geopolitical contradictions between the three world's Christian centers. Being a border area between Europe and Asia, Ukraine always had to make choices of the way of its civilizational development between European and Asia, between European and Euro-Asia, between Eastern and Western Christianity. I prepare a little presentation, but could not find how to open this presentation to show you some text and maybe some pictures which illustrated the process of our historical choices. If Sema could help me, because I could not find a special function how to open my computer presentation. Sema, are you here? Unfortunately, okay. In my presentation, very briefly, I tried to remember the history of Ukrainian Christianity and mark some very important events and dates in the history of Kyiv Christianity. I remember the first memories about the Christianity at our territory, and this is a great legend about Apostle Andrew. We know about the Pope Clement, the first century disciple of Apostle Peter, and he had a great missionary in Rus. We know about Gothic Bishop Theophilus, who present the territory of modern Ukraine in Council of Nicaea, and many, many others. What about our Rus history? This is the name of the Askold, the Prince Askold, Prince Igor, Princess Olga. You know about such heroic in the spiritual sense, like Princess Volodymyr the Wise, who accepted Christianity. But the situation connected with the Mongol invasion and decline of Kyiv significantly influenced the geopolitical and religious situation in Eastern Europe. My colleague mentioned that in the 13th century, the center of Kyiv metropolitan was changed and moved to Vladimir Naklyazmy and then to Moscow. And creation the Moscow Church with the subsequent self-proclamation of the Moscow Patriarchate and its very long year history of recognition by ecumenical patriarch include Moscow in the geopolitical system of inter-church relations of that time, and the long-standing inter-Orthodox confrontation between Moscow, Constantinople, and Kyiv began. And in my presentation, I show you the different maps, the rising of the Moscow kingdom and the strengthening of the Moscow church in the middle of 15th century. Until 1689, Kyiv made titanic attempts to preserve the identity of its church, but did not find the strength to resist Moscow and to defend its interests and status, and was eventually absorbed by Moscow Patriarchate. Constantinople tried to protect its historical rights like a mother church by periodically reminding Moscow of the primordial origins of the Christian faith in the Slavic lands, but distance and limited communications opportunities did their job. Later, Moscow took advantage of historical circumstances, first of all, the fall of Constantinople, and aggressively expanded its canonical lands, often confusing the provisional right to ordain Kyiv metropolitans with subordination of the religious Kyiv to ultra-Orthodox Moscow. I do not stop on the Rome, but we understand that Rome also declared its claim to the Ukrainian territories, and based on the historical events, they try to overcome the situation in Kyiv by his own power. What is the first my conclusion? There were periods in our history when Ukraine did so voluntarily, becoming an independent center of the East Slavic in particular, and the Eastern Christian world. However, the presence of aggressive neighbors made changes to the Kyiv-centric discourse of the country, including Ukrainians either to Constantinople, Rome, or Moscow. Under these circumstances, the orientation towards the development of independent and distinctive Kyiv Church was passionately lost, but at the same time, opposition to the world religious center, which sought to determine the spiritual life of Ukrainians, formed. And we could remember the long struggle of Ukrainians for their autocephalous church. This day we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the proclamation of the first autocephaly in 1920, and all the others. We know about these stories of the 7 attempts to establish autocephaly in Ukraine. Now Ukraine found itself in the tangle of contradictory relations between 3 centers, and can be disentangled into specific axis direction. I do not stop on these directions because this is a very long history, but I hope that I could describe these axes in my article. Many years of difficult relations between the 3 centers have shown that Kyiv has implemented a reality that interests both Tsargorod, Constantinople, and Moscow. It has become for many years a kind of apple of discord between not only Moscow and Constantinople through the Orthodox people, but also between Moscow and Rome through the Greek Catholic, as well as between Constantinople and Rome over the long-standing struggle for the domination in the religion. In the process of national and religious identification, the collective consciousness of Ukrainians has defined and the historical memory has kept the list of those injustices that Ukrainian has suffered. We have some pretensions to Moscow, to Constantinople, and to Rome, and I do not describe now this is because this is a very, very long list, but from Moscow, which brutally stole territory, history, culture, Church from Kyiv, destroying all non-Moscow things, Kyiv print books, Kyiv paintings, icons, singing, etc. Moscow objectively and subjectively contributed to the weakening of the Kyiv state, led to its decentralization, in every way imposing from the 12th century the idea of the need to divide it. From Constantinople, which actually agreed to the annexions of metropolis of Kyiv to Moscow. Unlike the Russians, who consider 1686 to be a year of complete and final transfer of Kyiv from the jurisdiction of Constantinople to the power of Patriarch of Moscow. The Ukrainians, despite the objective set of circumstances, did not approve of the position of Tsargorod, which received some compensation from the retreat from Kyiv, and from Rome, which often, while establishing its relations with Moscow, neglect the interests of Kyiv, and even now. Since 2019, the situation has changed significantly. There were no canonical or non-canonical Orthodox or pseudo-Orthodox churches in Ukraine. All are finally legal, all recognized, all canonical, even the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate. Ukraine now seeks to rectify the situation of subordination to the foreign centers and to get rid of colonial dependence of different countries and religions. Having received Tomos from Patriarch of Constantinople in 2018, the United Ukrainian Local Orthodox Church will in time effectively and confidently influence the geopolitical situation in the world. The framework of the historical religious political triangle will gradually be destroyed, and Ukraine will confidently declare its autonomous standing in the Christian oekumene. That's all.
Professor Fylypovych, thank you very much indeed. A very important and timely speech.
Yes, I tried some minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed.